February 2nd, 1943. Silence finally falls upon the ruins of a city that no longer exists. But to understand how the world got to this point, we need to go back a few months, to the moment when hell began, August 1942. The sky over Stalingrad darkens, not from clouds, but from hundreds of German bombers advancing in perfect formation. Within a few hours, the city turns into a sea of fire. Buildings collapse, streets disappear under rubble, civilians run aimlessly as explosions fill the air with pure destruction. And then comes the question that few dared to ask at that moment. How could a single city become the deadliest place in the history of warfare? In this video, you will understand how the Battle of Stalingrad went from being just another German offensive to becoming the most brutal, psychological and decisive confrontation of World War II. But what makes this battle different from all the others is not just the number of dead. It's the fact that there, the war ceased to be about strategy and became about survival. And it all starts with a plan. A daring, almost impossible plan, devised by a man who believed that conquering Stalingrad would be the final blow against the Soviet Union. That man was Adolf Hitler. After the failure in Moscow the previous winter, Hitler needed a victory, not just a military one, but a symbolic one. And Stalingrad was the perfect target, not only because of the name, which carried the weight of Joseph Stalin, but also because of its strategic location on the banks of the Volga River, one of the main Soviet supply routes. If Stalingrad were to fall, the south of the Soviet Union would be vulnerable, and the path to the Caucasus oil fields would be open. It was a risky gamble. But for Hitler, it was all or nothing. On the other hand, Stalin also understood what was at stake, and his order was simple, short, ruthless. Not one step back. The city could not fall, no matter the cost. And that cost would be unimaginable, because what would come next would not be an ordinary battle. There would be no clear front lines, there would be no pauses. It would be a war inside destroyed buildings, in the rubble, in dark corridors, where each room conquered cost dozens of lives, soldiers fighting just meters apart. No room to retreat, no room to breathe, a type of combat that no one was prepared to face. And while the world still saw this as just another German offensive, something much bigger was about to happen, something that would turn Stalingrad into a veritable human meat grinder. But here's the point that almost no one realizes at the beginning of this story. Germany was winning, moving forward quickly, dominating territory, believing that victory was inevitable. So, what went wrong? How did an army considered virtually invincible begin to crumble, street by street, building by building? And why would Stalingrad become the beginning of the end for the Third Reich? That's what you're about to find out. When German troops reached the shores of Stalingrad, it was no longer just an offensive, it was a race against time. On paper, everything seemed simple. Germany advanced with one of the most powerful forces ever seen, the Sixth Army, led by Friedrich Paulus, a disciplined strategist, calculating, trained to win quick battles, and in the beginning, he won. German forces swept across miles of Soviet territory with astonishing speed. Cities fell, defenses collapsed, and the path to Stalingrad seemed virtually open. But there was one detail that would change everything. The city did not fall. She resisted, even after the massive bombings. Even with thousands dead, even with virtually all of its infrastructure destroyed, Stalingrad was still standing, or at least what was left of it. And that's exactly where the battle began to change, because, ironically, the rubble ended up favoring those who were defending it. Each destroyed building became a fortress, each street a trap, each floor an independent battlefield. The Germans were trained for rapid warfare, movement speed, large-scale coordination. But in Stalingrad, that no longer existed. The war has become something completely different, fighting just meters away, grenades, being thrown through broken windows, snipers hiding among destroyed walls, soldiers fighting inside the same building. On different floors, a type of warfare that even has a name, rat war, a war of moments, because the soldiers moved like shadows between holes, tunnels, and rubble, waiting for survival, not for territory. And in this brutal scenario, a new factor began to emerge, something silent, almost invisible, but extremely deadly. Soviet snipers. Among them, one name was beginning to stand out. Vasily Zaitsev. Patient, precise, lethal. Every shot, a death, each death. An enormous psychological impact, because in Stalingrad, it wasn't just the body that was wearing down. It was in mind. German soldiers began to suffer a psychological breakdown. Fear came from all sides, from above, from below, from within the walls. There was no safety, there was no rest. Meanwhile, the Soviets were doing something even more impressive. They kept sending reinforcements, crossing the Volga River, under constant bombardment, knowing that many would not arrive alive. But even so, they came. Inexperienced men, armed civilians, soldiers with virtually no training, all with a single mission: hold Stalingrad. And there was a brutal reason behind it. Because for Joseph Stalin, retreating was not an option. Actually, it was a crime. Entire units were executed for attempting to flee. Officers were punished for retreating. The order was clear: fight or die. And this created something extremely dangerous. An army that had no choice, no room for failure, no chance to retreat. And while all this was happening in the destroyed streets, a silent change was beginning outside the city. A change that the Germans didn't realize in time. Because while they were focused on conquering Stalingrad, something much bigger was being prepared. Something that would not only stop the German advance, but trap them within their own trap. And when that happened, there would be no way out anymore. While the fighting continued within the ruins of Stalingrad, something far more dangerous was happening far from German eyes, silently, meticulously. The Red Army began to prepare a counterattack, not an ordinary attack, but a gigantic operation, designed to change the course of the war. This operation had a name: Operation Uranus. And their goal wasn't just to push the Germans out of the city, it was completely surrounded. But here is the most important detail, and the one most underestimated by the Germans. The troops protecting the flanks of the Sixth Army were not German. They were Romanian, Italian, Hungarian, poorly equipped, poorly prepared, exhausted. And that was a fatal weakness. While Friedrich Paulus concentrated his forces inside Stalingrad, believing he was just a few steps away from victory, the Soviets watched, waiting, calculating, preparing for the exact moment. And then, on November 19th, 1942, hell has changed direction. More than 1 million Soviet soldiers advanced simultaneously, tanks breaking through defensive lines, artillery crushing enemy positions. A brutal, coordinated and unstoppable offensive. The flanks collapsed. The Romanian lines simply couldn't hold. They were crushed in a matter of hours, and suddenly, what seemed like a German victory turned into a deadly trap, because the Sixth Army was being surrounded, and worse, they didn't realize it in time. Within a few days, Soviet forces closed the encirclement, a giant ring, trapping over 250,000 soldiers inside. Stalingrad, no way out, no escape route, no plan. It was the beginning of the end. But here comes one of the most absurd moments in this whole story. Even surrounded, even isolated, Adolf Hitler refused any attempt to retreat. The order was clear. The Sixth Army will remain in Stalingrad until the last man, until the last bullet. It was a decision based not on strategy, but on pride. And that decision would be costly, because keeping an army surrounded required something essential: supplies, food, ammunition, fuel, and the only way to deliver that would be through the air, an air bridge. But there was a problem, gigantic: the Luftwaffe. The German Air Force simply didn't have the capability for that. They would need hundreds of tons of supplies per day, but they only delivered a fraction. And as the days went by, the situation inside Stalingrad was beginning to collapse. Hungry soldiers, out of ammunition, freezing in the brutal Russian winter, the temperatures plummeting well below zero, injured and untreated, without medicine, without hope, and yet the order remained the same: to fight, resist, do not back down. But something was beginning to become clear, even to the German officers. They had been abandoned. Meanwhile, on the Soviet side, the pressure only increased. The net was closing in, day after day, meter by meter, no rush, without mercy, because now the situation had completely reversed. The hunters had become the prey, and within that destroyed city, an entire army awaited, slowly, its fate inside Stalingrad. Time had stopped, days blended together, nights froze any hope. The Sixth Army, once one of the most powerful forces in the world, was now but a shadow. Hungry men, exhausted, sick, slowly freezing in brutal temperatures. No supplies, no reinforcements, no way out, and yet the order remained: fight until the end. But the end was drawing ever closer. Each day, the Soviet noose tightened. Less space, fewer resources, less life. German soldiers began to die not only in combat, but from starvation, from the cold, from despair. Some reached the absolute limit of survival, and even so, they continued fighting because there was no alternative, because retreating was never allowed. And then, at the height of this collapse, one last desperate move was made. Adolf Hitler promoted Friedrich Paulus to Field Marshal, a clear message. No German Field Marshal had ever surrendered. It was indirect pressure, a silent command: die, but don't surrender. But the reality inside Stalingrad no longer obeyed orders, because that was no longer a war. It was pure survival. And on January 31st, 1943, the inevitable happened. Paulus surrendered. No heroic speeches, no final offensive, no glory, just silence. 2 days later, the last pockets of German resistance were eliminated. The battle was over. Stalingrad had survived, but at what cost? More than 2 million dead soldiers, civilians, entire cities destroyed. One of the bloodiest battles in human history. But here's the point that changes everything. Stalingrad was not just a German defeat. That was the turning point. The moment when the Nazi advance was finally broken. The beginning of the retreat, the beginning of the end of the Third Reich. After that, Germany would never again regain control of the war in the East, and the world would never be the same again. But perhaps the most frightening thing of all isn't the numbers, not even destruction, not even victory. This is what this battle reveals about human nature. How far can someone go when they have no choice? How much can a man endure before he breaks? And what happens when war stops being about strategy and becomes simply survival? Stalingrad was not just a battle. It was a warning, a brutal reminder of what happens when ambition, power, and pride surpass all human limits. And now that you know this story, the final question is inevitable. Did we learn anything from this, or are we doomed to repeat the same mistakes? If you want more stories like this, deep, intense, and revealing the most brutal side of history, subscribe to the channel. Because here, you don't just see what happened, you understand why it happened,